Like we already mentioned in the previous slide, most basic syntax in C is pretty like the syntax in Java. So such as the basic data types and most variables and definitions, and also most operators. However, don't forget that C is function-oriented and Java is object-oriented. So there's no class dot operators in C programming language. And other than that, most of the operators in C is pretty like the Java operators. For example, plus, plus, minus, minus, and plus equals, etc. And here, this condition example. So even though it is also provided in Java syntax, however, based on my experience, it is very rarely used by the students when they written Java programs. And on the other hand, it has been used in C program very often. So some students may not know how it works. Then let's look at an example to see how this condition clause works. So suppose we have a numbers of integer variables. We have a integer variable a is equal to 7. And we have integer variable b equal to 8. And also we have a third integer variable c. It depends on this condition clause. So we have a condition, this one. And based on the result of this condition, we will decide if this condition is true, the C value will be equal to A. Otherwise, the C value will be equal to B. So obviously, this condition is false. So therefore, the value of C will be equal to the value of B. Actually, is C equal to 8. So some students may ask that, okay, Dr. Wang, so this condition is pretty like the if-else statement. Yes, it is. In Java, it will be written like this. So if A greater than B, then C equal to A, else C equal to B. So if in if-else statement, this assignment will be, or this condition will be written like this. So just like I have mentioned in the previous lecture, actually both for this mode and this mode, for both of them, they are all correct. But when you talk about the performance or the efficiency, so when these two modes of codes have been converted to binary code, the first mode for this one, it can be converted very efficiently and it can be run very efficiently in binary form. However, the second one, this one, can be only treated as a standard if-else statement. So here the execution efficiency is much lower than the first one. So although this syntax is implemented both in C programming language and the Java programming language, so you will see it very frequent in C program more than in Java programs. And for the remainder syntax are very similar to Java, such as if then else clause, the for while loops, arrays, and the functions. But don't forget that. So there's no class dot function calls in C programming language because C is a function-oriented programming language instead of object-oriented. So other than that, they are pretty similar to each other. The major difference between C and Java is that C support explicit pointer. So the definition of a pointer is a variable whose value is the address of another variable. So sometimes using pointer is pretty convenient and even necessary in some cases. So one example, and then later you will see in your programming assignment, is the dynamic memory allocation. So where your program may dynamically request an additional memory space from the operating system. So then you need to define a pointer type variable. And later, when the operating system assigns the memory space to your program, so you can use the pointer variable to point this memory space. So after you finish to use them, and don't forget to return them back to the operating system. Otherwise, you can imagine what would happen. So after you finish the program and the operating system cannot claim the memory space back. So if you run the program again and again, the operating system eventually will use up all the memory space and no more program can be executed in the operating system anymore. So from this example, you can see the next point of C programming language. So C is prone to unexpected error if it is not carefully handled. So even though pointer is convenient and sometimes is necessary, but when you use it, you must be very, very careful. So one example we just referred is also called memory leaking. So which means you dynamically allocated the memory from operating system, but you forgot to return them back to the operating system. Another example is that when you use the pointer to point some memory space, for example, an array. So if you simply increase the pointer of the array, but forgot to check whether the pointer hit the boundary of the memory space or not, it may very easily go beyond the boundary of the memory space and point to some values which belongs to other program. So that can easily cause unexpected errors. And when you run code like this, so you will encounter the segmentation fault. So the computer will combine that with the segmentation fault. So when you run your C program, debug your C program, and when you see the segmentation fault, with a very high probability that something wrong with your pointer operations. So you may need to double check there. And then let's see how can we declare a pointer. Actually, it's quite simple. So just like you define the standard variable type. And actually, the only difference is that so you will add a star in front of the variable name. And also, you need to specify the value type. So where the pointer will point at. And also here, we have two real examples. And the first one, we define a pointer who points to a value with an integer type. And the second one, we define a pointer who points to a value with a character type.